our panelists go ahead and introduce themselves and give a one-sentence overview of what their firm does. Scott, you want to get started?
Hi. Scott English. I run the venture group at the Hearst Corporation. We're a captive corporate venture group. Hearst is a very large media company in pretty much all media formats. We invest in sort of Series A and B stage and everything media and technology related, marketing services. We've been doing it steadily for about 20 years.
Great, thanks.
My name's Claudia Iannazzo. I am one of the partners in a fund called AlphaPrime Ventures. We focus on safety and security, so that is everything from cyber, which everybody immediately jumps to physical security, risk management, transaction surety, so as long as it's in the safety and security realm.
Right. Hi, is this on? Yes, Emily Becher. I wear a lot of hats, but for today, Samsung Next. We look at pre-seed through Series B, focus on what's known as frontier technology, and we fund companies New York, San Francisco, Israel, Europe. Pleasure to meet everyone.
Great, Vic.
Hello. Hi, I'm Vic Singh, founding partner with ENIAC Ventures. We're an institutional seed stage firm managing about $170 million. Our latest fund is a $100 million vehicle and focused on investing across the S-curve and technology with a deep focus on frontier stuff, AR, VR, AI, robotics, computer vision broadly, blockchain, things like that. And then, at the top of that curve is smartphones. So excited to be here and talk to you guys.
Thanks, guys. So let's just kick things off. Can I hear from you guys? What is the most innovative visual startup idea that you've seen recently?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of stuff in autonomous right now, like autonomous vehicles. So, we look at it as kind of like a platform where you will have an OS layer to actually drive the cars, and then you'll have a lot of companies that build on top of that. The same thing happened in mobile. You'll have analytics companies, security companies, cloud services companies. So the most recent one I saw at the OS layer, which we're kind of looking pretty hard at right now, it uses computer vision to drive the car autonomously, but reduces. Is it which one? It's I can't say right now until we close terms, but no, it's not that one. But it's cool because it's more reactive. So like it can predict what other vehicles around you are going to do, and it can predict what you're going to do, as well as pedestrians and what they're going to do. So it can actually reduce the accident rate like to a very, very small percentage without driving a ton of miles. Like if you look at like the project that the folks at Google are working on at Waymo, they've driven like 3 million miles, and they still haven't gotten it to level 5, they call it, which is like super safety. But these guys can get to level 5 with 100,000 miles, which is really fascinating, and a lot of it is around computer vision and really understanding the external environment as opposed to just what you as a driver are doing.
And aside from the cool tech, what about that makes it a compelling investment opportunity?
Yeah, so I was going to say we actually, we'll probably should talk later. So we've looked at about 9 companies in the space as well, not surprisingly. And I think for me, there's a couple of different things. The semi-autonomous agents are being utilized in the cars today, but that's a platform for many, many other things. And so inputs, sensory inputs that learn are being deployed in the autonomous vehicle means, but obviously there's a tremendous number of use cases in the
What's
future.
a couple, name an example or two?
Oh gosh, you can pick that up. We'll go down the road and everyone will talk about the same category.
Well, I was going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to answer your original question.
Sure.
So, we focus on safety and security, and if you think about cybersecurity attacks on the moment in the US, companies have really got a fairly high level of awareness of the problem, and there's a lot of companies looking to solve that problem. But if you speak with security specialists in the US, they will tell you that the risk of an infectious disease outbreak in the US is much higher, and the impact is profoundly deeper. So recently, we have started looking at all kinds of issues around diagnosis, containment, and tracking of infectious disease outbreaks. And we love this space because the most valuable visual aid that you have is one that almost every American in the US has, which is the smartphone. So we've started to look particularly in a bunch of really interesting companies that use the smartphone to diagnose whether you have certain illnesses. So about 15 years ago, I started looking at laser Doppler technologies. And at the time, I saw this company that 3M had spent a lot of time with in Stockholm. And it had a very expensive camera. It would look at a mole or a melanoma, and with around about 53% accuracy, it could tell you whether that spot was malignant or benign. Now, to put that in context, that is about the same level of accuracy as flipping a coin, right? And that's not the level of diagnosis that we can actually start tracking infectious diseases with. But there's increasingly a wave of companies out there that are looking at this problem with the smartphone and not just, to be fair, not just the camera, but also several other sensors that are in the current and future versions of the smartphones to be able to detect if you have contracted early stages of Ebola or bird flu or Zika virus or other things like that. So, I mean, I know we're kind of doom and gloom in our fund, but there's some really exciting innovations coming out from that space.
Okay, so we've got autonomous, multiple use cases for autonomous, medical. Scott, you're in media.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of doom and gloom. I guess it's all the sort of fun stuff. For me, it's one of our most recent investments, a company called 8i, which is in the VR and AR space, which we've spent a fair amount of time looking at. And they do...
Wait, it's called AI, and it's in VR. 8i, got it.
And it's in the VR space, and they do holograms. And so they are a technology company that's built the technology to enable for them to create holograms of real people that are fully 3D rotatable, that today they can shoot them now in their studio in a low-cost environment in about 20 minutes, and then distribute that so people can import them and put them into social media. And then over the long term, the company hopes to essentially do the equivalent of FaceTime in a hologram environment using AR. And that we're years away from that, but that's the end goal and why it's sort of lots of fun to be involved with the company.
And so that's why I'm most interested in the investment opportunities behind things like VR, because it's going to be years away. It could be 5, it could be 30. When you're making an investment, how do you...
We're hoping it's not 30.
How do you assess that risk? How do you decide what feels real and what could be real?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously very difficult. I think, in the case of VR and AR, right now there's a fair amount of skepticism about the timing here on how fast the market will reach any level of penetration where you can build a real business here. What attracted me about 8i was they had that long-term vision and a shorter-term revenue opportunity from social media.
So is this like Tupac at concerts, like those kinds of holograms? Are you talking?
Yeah, and just more, you can create holograms of famous people and put them into your social media feed.
Got it.
So you could do a duet with somebody real that looks like you're actually singing with them.
Have you done any duets?
No, I don't sing. I've done other things, but yes. But at the end of the day, it's really a cost containment issue for the company. It's when you have a market like this, it's making sure that you have enough investment in cash to make it out through, past where you think, the market will evolve.
I'd love to hear from the rest of the panelists. I mean, how are you helping your portfolio companies balance short-term, cost savings or burn, I guess, versus a very long-term play with, like you said, potentially tons of applications, but maybe none right now?
Yeah, I'd like to start and we go down the line. I mean, I think, just coming back to sort of timing on the market, I think for sort of deep emerging platform kind of bets, we tend to try to bet at the ecosystem layer. So SDKs and developer tools that'll allow those businesses and those types of new media content to spread. So our first VR deal is Vero Media, which is an SDK platform that allows any mobile app to have a VR experience out of the box. I think short-term AR on mobile is pretty much here. starting with the phone and ultimately glasses and whatnot. So, the concept of mixed reality broadly, I think, has arrived, but the use cases, the killer use cases, haven't been figured out yet beyond, I guess, Pokemon Go or whatever. But I think for like cash, when you invest in a very frontier tech-like company, you actually get a fair bit of discount on traction to the next round. So if you're building like an enterprise SaaS play or a consumer social play, you need a ton of traction to get to your next round. But if you're building like an OS for a self-driving car with crazy sensors and a bunch of PhDs, it just has to like work well, to get to the A. So we're still focused on 18 months of cash.
Or if you're certain AI companies, you'll get
they
snapped
could
up
get
by
scooped
Ford
up, but
within.
we're not in the business of doubles and triples, although it's nice to have sometimes. We're looking to build like a sustainable company. So, we think that you could continue to fund these companies as their product cycles mature and they get better, and then you'll have this intersection of where the product is ready and the market's ready, and that could be around a B round for some of these frontier tech companies. But you're multi-state. I'd love to kind of.
And so, I think we take a portfolio approach. So we'll go in pre-seed, seed, all the way through B. And we were discussing this beforehand. One thing that we do, which is fairly different, we have 20 operating professionals on staff who have deep technical product backgrounds. So there's a guy in New York who worked at the Genome Institute. And so when we're working with a company, we say, we're in enabling technologies, we do frontier tech, but we're really with you through this process. And so early companies sit in our space. Sometimes we fund them, sometimes we don't, and they have a clustering of people who are solving really hard problems. And so it's not just in the diligence process that we'll look at it. Sometimes we'll sort of jump in and say, hey, there are 5 guys who are doing these same things. So I'd like to say we have patience. There's efficiencies in the round, and we basically build clustering and cohorts of people who are doing similar things, who help solve problems faster.
So not necessarily obsessed with commercialization right off the bat.
I think you can't be. Although, we're certainly super cognizant of pilots and what pilots tell us. But for us, mainly it's what you learn through that process and not pushing the revenue too quickly, but really understanding the dynamics of the marketplace.
Claudia?
Yeah, it's interesting. With frontier tech, there's this problem, and I think it's also why you see so many larger corporates lead with some of the really trickier problems. You need so much capital to get some of this technology developed. You just do. So you have 2 choices as an entrepreneur. One is you build an early stage, if you like, version 1.0 commercial opportunity, which actually isn't the big opportunity, but it's something that just gets you some revenue and some proof points to your business while you keep developing and iterating your technology for the big opportunity. And so with those kind of companies, what we do at our fund is we have a global reseller network, and we are looking to push those companies through our reseller network to actually help them build those incremental revenues so they can stay alive long enough to get the next round of capital, and then ultimately also to iterate that big idea. The second thing we do with frontier tech is the reality is VCs are really crappy investors in this kind of technology. Our hold periods are typically 5 to 7 years. And for most of you, that's not going to be enough. So what we try to do is actually partner those kind of early stage technologies with other types of capital that actually has more patience. So that may be strategic capital. It also may be a whole group of family offices who care about the problem or have their own conglomerate businesses, and they're looking for long-term solutions. And those guys tend to have longer time horizons, much more patience, in many cases, much deeper pockets than any one venture fund. And so we focus on the revenue and also on the capital partnering.
That's fascinating about the family office thing, because I've noticed that there are so many new family offices rushing to do direct investment, and this might be kind of new for them, and I have a feeling that maybe in 5 years or so, some of them might change their mind once they see the failure rates.
I don't know. I mean, the family offices we've come across, they're pretty sophisticated, and these guys just haven't branded their type of investments. They've always been floating around. They've been doing directs. They, in many cases, are successful entrepreneurs themselves and self-made, and they've been doing this all along. It's just now I feel we're seeing family offices brand themselves much better and much more visibly.
So how do entrepreneurs find these family offices?
Oh, you know what? if anyone has cracked the code on that, come talk to me, because we're fundraising as well and we would love to get to them. It's super hard. It's persistence, it's reading a lot, and we are, entrepreneurs have to be a little bit shameless and just walking up to family offices or cold approaching them and saying, this is what we do, and if it's something you're interested in, let's talk about it.
Vic, do you care to respond to the comment that VCs are terrible at investing long term?
No. But what I will say, the family office thing is interesting. They are a dark pool, but once you have them as your LPs, they look to you as a signal, right? So if I'm leading a robotics deal, I have a family office and say, hey, I've been looking at Frontier for a while. I really like this one. What do you think? If you're going to lead, I'll come inside and get parted around. I think VCs are sheep, though, to be more direct, right? So, and they
the
look
most
for
self-loathing VC panel of all time.
Yeah, but they look for a shepherd, right? And then everything is fine. So we try our best to be that shepherd. We don't really need another VC to say, I'm dropping a term sheet. That's our job. And then the round usually comes together pretty quickly because everyone kind of crowds around. But you got to have conviction. You got to do your work, obviously. You got to look the founders in the eye and partner with them and know that they're going to have all that grit and everything else to really build an iconic company. But you have to have balls, right? And just be let's do this fucking deal. And then everyone else is going to come along. So.
I like that conviction.
It's kind of hard to top that, but I will say on a more practical level, if you can't find the family offices, I would also say there's subcategories of specialties of people who are raising fund and deploying capital folks don't think about. So we have a company that we have funded in the sort of smart cities area, but they are doing water submetering, and we have been really impressed with some folks in the real estate space, in the insurance space, in these categories where they've understood. This one company that we work with very frequently was the first innovation we did, the first startup was the actual real estate business 100 years ago. And so we really had to learn how to innovate in this category. And so they have capital, and they're really looking for folks to partner with them to help them through the process. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just the family office, these other categories where people have really, over the last 5 or 6 years, accelerated their learning and provide great distribution channels, really good insights for startups that have previously been untapped.
Mm-hmm. All right, I want to talk about what is overhyped. And I know VCs are often afraid to insult potential portfolio company entrepreneurs, but just go for it. What when you see a pitch now and you just automatically are uninterested because it's way too overhyped?
So I'll just say, and Evan's probably going to beat me right now. So we see CV for blah so many times. We see that all the time. And then people use AI as language that's just sort of okay, if we write it in, it's really valuable. And so, for some of this stuff in computer vision, we're in the 6th and 7th inning, and it has been really commoditized. And the edge cases are very, very interesting. But for many cases, people are sort of saying, hey, all these companies are getting fundraised if they put these words, and so they're sort of reconstituting their companies in a way which is really transparent by the end of the pitch.
Well, all the big data companies just changed it to AI, right? Scott,
right, it was big data, then it was AI, then it was VR AR, right? And people used to try to squash themselves in somehow into that category, and now it's IoT. So, and what's going to be next year, who knows? But at the end of the day, I think just look at your business and pitching your business as being take all the buzzwords out, right? Because you just actually, to investors, I had a pitch last week which was, we're a big data-driven AI company with VR applications. And I just wanted to slap myself.
Because anyone out there?
I know what all those words are meant to me. I know, but it meant nothing to me except that this entrepreneur did not know what his business was, right? He wasn't telling me what he did and what customer problem he was solving. So I'd say just focus on that, get rid of all the buzzwords, because at the end of the day, investors who use the buzzwords aren't really worth having either. So
That's a good takeaway. So I'd love to hear what the rest of the panel thinks as far as what inning we're in when it comes to computer vision.
I think it depends on how you look at it. So I think we are past like the third inning on like sort of the social part of computer vision with AR and special effects and filters and AI art and all that stuff that came out. But I think we're now getting into like the fourth with the really hardcore stuff. I mean, you know, as Emily was saying, like a lot of this stuff is commoditized. So when you talk to founders, it's like, oh, you're building like this new computer vision tech, but you're using like all this off-the-shelf stuff, right?
Just
so
like clarify,
it's just,
wrapped, yeah.
exactly. So like, and AI itself, you know, if you believe in the singularity that computers are going to be, you know, smarter than humans one day, that in of itself is moving at that rate exponentially. So all of the new stuff is constantly getting commoditized. So, you know, it behooves investors to kind of really unpack that and really see what they're going after. But I definitely think for computer vision, we're definitely in like the third to fourth inning. I think the first third of the ball game was a lot of the social stuff and what is perceived as AR, but isn't truly AR, right? So like if you look at you know, putting an overlay on a camera and not having edge detection, you know, you take a little virtual car, you roll it across the table, it keeps going, right? It should fall off. That's true AR. Where it really understands the physical world, but people are calling AR anything with overlays on the camera. So, and this is an example of founders using AR in a way that is kind of meaningless. It's really not what it is. So.
Scott, you're nodding. What phase or what part of the phase
No,
do
I
you
think
think we're
that's
in?
exactly right. I think I'd probably agree on the stage. And especially for me, I'm much more interested in the applications of all the technology. And that is still very early.
Oh, you mean the businesses?
The actual business side of it and how it's going to be used in real life. And we're very early there. I mean, you know, you look at what Amazon's doing or what Google's doing, in store and things like that. I mean, you know, just it's going to be unbelievable. And it's really early. And I don't think we even really truly understand what is going to be possible and what consumers are actually going to accept in their lives from consumer-facing applications.
So you mentioned Amazon. And let's talk about that because Amazon is doing a lot with this. Facebook is developing all kinds of technology around that. All of the biggest tech companies, the quote-unquote Frightful Five, are working on this aggressively. So I'm curious, is there room for startups here? Are they just going to get absorbed into the Borg? Are they going to get crunched by the big competitors?
So, I mean, obviously, FAIR is amazing. You know, Facebook and Amazon, they start with an incredible amount of visual data. Let's just be really intellectually honest. They have a really unfair advantage, and then you layer talent and technology. It doesn't mean that there isn't room for startups, but if you think about what you're doing, that enormous amount of data just gives them a leg up in that capacity.
It used to be in commerce that startups, you had to figure out what are you doing that Amazon isn't going to compete with you on. But at this point, I think Amazon will compete with you on everything.
But you know, 15 years ago, it was the same conversation. It was just different names. It was IBM and, you know, GE. And so, you know, I think some of the big players today, they're fantastic acquirers. We love them to acquire our startups. So I think there's definitely a place for startups. But I think the cluster of who the big guys are going to be in 5-10 years, we don't know those names yet. Maybe we know a couple of them, but it's going to be a really different landscape. And you know,
we're hearing the bear case on Facebook.
Yeah, well, you know, I think even Facebook has its own challenges. So, you know, I think we're going to look in 10 years' time back on Facebook and view it in the same way we now look at IBM and GE. Still great companies, still perform massive value to society, huge revenues, incredibly impressive, but there will be new names.
All right, I have many more questions, but I just want to get everyone in the audience thinking about questions that they might have for the panelists, and in a couple minutes we'll open it up. But I also want to ask about audio, because we're talking about Amazon. They obviously have pulled ahead with Alexa, but Google Home is kind of coming right up there. What do you think that is a long-term trend, or do you think that, and what does that mean for visual computing?
Start and go down lining it. I mean, I think it's natural UI, kind of how I think about it, where it's kind of weird to have this screen in front of you all the time, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Feels pretty normal to me. I do it all day.
It's normal now, but like your neck hurts and it's a whole thing. So I think like we're going to a world of seamless computing where, computers are going to be doing work for us. Voice is one of those interfaces, sight is one of those as well, speech, all of this stuff. It's natural UI, kind of the way I think about it. I think Amazon crushed it with Alexa. I think it's a great product. I'm really worried every time, like it's just sitting there, and I'm not saying Alexa, but does it know what I'm saying? So are they acquiring that data set? So that kind of freaks me out a little bit, but
They are.
they probably are. Like, why not, right? It's somewhere in their terms and conditions. But, just going back to the big companies, I think, like, the big difference between now and the earlier era is, like, those companies did not innovate at the speed of lightning like a Facebook does, right? I mean, someone tweeted out the other day that, Twitter's largest problem is figuring out if they should edit a tweet, whereas Facebook is figuring out how to have a human listen through their skin, right? So it's ridiculous, the fast pace. Like, they are startups. Like, they're not fucking around when it comes to that. Excuse my French. But I do believe that in all of these emerging platforms, big, mega, iconic companies will be born. And that's really all we need as VCs. Just one of these in each platform.
And so the platforms, just so we know exactly what you're talking about, the platforms are car, home.
Autonomous, AR, VR, mixed reality broadly, the natural UI stuff we were talking about, robotics and AI cutting across that. And I actually think the biggest company potentially will be formed on the blockchain. And you will actually see media and computer vision on the blockchain as well. And that will be the ultimate path to the singularity, where every single user plugs into this blockchain. And it's just
really
finding everything.
Hearst is working on that, right?
Like, here comes Skynet,
Wow.
right?
It's just when AI meets blockchain in a big
So
way, that will
depressing.
be the mega company of our life that allows us to get to at least asymptotically approach the singularity.
So you named a ton of new platforms, and for the last, decade or so, venture capitalists have had it kind of easy because mobile has been the big platform, and just kind of invest in apps, and it's very clear, it's very obvious what
Vic, you had it easy.
what the
Just
big
easy.
hits are.
I mean,
But now
ENIAC was
there's-
a mobile fund up until Fund 4, right? So.
Exactly. Now there's like 10 potential platforms, and it's not exactly clear what shape they're going to take. And so I would love to hear from all you guys how you're navigating that. Are you putting all your eggs in one platform basket?
I mean, I think you have to be like really deep in a couple. Like all of those that I mentioned, I'm just kind of learning, but I'm probably going to end up just focusing on AI and blockchain for the next year because
Sounds
it's
like
just
it.
too much stuff to learn.
And I would say similarly, we, I hate frontier tech, but we are focused on that, but we are incredibly deep by MD, who really sort of owns and understands very specific areas. Because I agree, if you are generalist across the board, it's very hard to make smart decisions, and frankly, for us, really help our portfolio companies.
Mm-hmm. I just realized that this is happening, and that's really cool. They're sketching out the things that we're talking about. But now seems like a good time to open up the audience for questions. I think we'll just do hand raise. Oh, no, we have a mic over there. So if anyone has a question, would you like to raise your hand? Anybody? There's one.
Hi. So given that many of you guys are looking at nascent technologies at the seed stage, what do you look for in terms of traction? I mean, some of these companies may not have a business use case for 3 or more years. What really prompts you to look for traction, and how do you value that?
So, we focus on safety and security. We're looking for you to be solving a problem that actually matters. In the last year, I saw a lot of technology solutions looking for a problem to solve. So at the seed stage, I take your point on traction. That traction could be all kinds of things, right? We're looking for founders who can convince other people to come work with them when those other people could really get exceptional and real salaries elsewhere. So you're looking for founders who can build A-teams around them. You're looking for real-world problems. And you're looking for a founder who, no matter what they're doing, they're actually hitting milestones, right? That milestone may be architecture scoping or building out the first prototype or, securing the first pilot. So you can show all of that traction without revenue coming in the door. Revenue's nice, and we tend to invest once you've got a couple of pilots. not because we're looking for that revenue traction, but because we accept that we're not the smartest kids in the room, and the people who can actually best tell us if your product is really solving a real world problem are your customers. So we want to talk to them. But it's not so much about the revenue traction at that point.
Guys? Anyone else? Okay, question in the back over there? Back left. Yeah, sorry. And then we'll go over there next.
So when you look into investing in medtech startups, how do you skip on investing in another Theranos?
The Theranos question. Well, Emily, you were talking about how you guys work with all kinds of PhDs that sort of help you with those kinds of problems.
So I would say that's a very different component. So how do we make sure that we're not investing in a company that is fundamentally unsound is sort of the question. And so everybody has sort of their risk tolerance and risk portfolio. And we put money in pre-seed. So we are very, very, very nascent. So we can never say that we've de-risked the business that we're in. And so back to the question about pilots, when we're talking to entrepreneurs, and I mean this because I've started 2 companies and I've funded in 2 different roles, it is not always your answer, it's how you're coming to the resolution of that answer. And so when people are asking you about your pricing model, it's understanding how you've gone through that decision-making process. And so we learn a tremendous amount about the entrepreneurs, about the CEOs, and how they make decisions through, many of them sit in our space for months before you make any investment decision about how they're solving their real-world problems every day. And so we can never say that we won't fund a company that fails, because many of them do. But our hope is that the judgment and critical thinking of the CEO, we've gotten to know them well enough that we trust and believe in them.
Great. Another question over here.
Hello, it's George from Imaga. My question is, because the keyword today was frontier technology, or the key sentence. So I'm kind of interested, like maybe with one sentence each of you, how do you do technical due diligence on frontier technology?
We're building up our stable of PhDs right now, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah. Keep them stable.
But yeah, we have some founders. We have over 100 companies now, and they weren't frontier tech, but a lot of them are deeply technical and are building AI themselves. So we look to them. We actually have another new founder.
You look to your existing portfolio.
Existing portfolio, yeah. And one of them actually has an AI agency. So that's like super duper helpful. Plus, through customer interaction and diligence, you build up a network of customers, PhD customers, that you can always call on later on. So we're working on that now, but we have like a good starting base. But it's a great question. Like you never know where the blind spot is.
So if you're a PhD, you should just quit your startup and advise venture capital firms as consultants. They clearly are willing to pay for that.
I would say we have an unusual model, which is we have 20 people on staff who have the capacity to build products themselves, and so they come to us a variety of ways. Some of them are companies we funded and did well or did not do well and become absorbed into our ecosystem one way or the other. And then we also are first money in with a lot of new ideas, and so whether it's our EIR model or, hey, come sit with us, we have across the globe at any point 15 to 20 startups sort of in our house. Who are solving very, very similar problems. And then over time, we have a pretty strong network. And then the cherry on the top is Samsung is our single LP. And so we have access to, Samsung spends $14 billion a year in R&D. That's the GDP of a small country. And so almost every problem is being solved somewhere. And so we will, although it's not porous in, we sort of lean to folks on the outside to say, hey, we're solving these problems. What are you doing? We're building drones in South. What are you learning, and what are trends that help us get a holistic view?
All right, we have time for one more quick question, I think, up over here.
Yeah, so as more people have access to these technologies through APIs, models that are being shared, public data that's being shared, it becomes more a commodity, specifically in computer vision. Like, it's easier now to label an image than it was 5 years ago. So are we at that stage where it's a commodity, and how does that affect your investment strategy in the future?
See, I don't see it as a commodity. And okay, I'm going to take you back into security. I know it's really boring, but this is how we think about visualization. I guarantee you, in the Situation Room at the moment, there is a big map up of Manchester and the perpetrators of the last bombing attack and all of their relationships. And why do we visually put it up? Like, it's literally dots with lines. We put it up because you can make massive intuitive leaps when you visually display the data set. And the technology simply is not there yet to make those big intuitive leaps between data. There is a lot of false positives in visual analysis at the moment. So I think we've got a long way to go on that. So I'm one of the people who do not believe visual data analysis yet is a commodity. I suspect it'll get there at some point, but in my mind, I'm still seeing entrepreneurs in the security sector still visually map out the threat models because it's the only way to see the whole pattern.
All right, that's a very hopeful and positive note to end it on, and we're also out of time. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you.